Welcome to another episode of Shaken Not Stirred. I'm your host, Martini, and if this is your first time to my channel, welcome. If this is your second or third time checking out a video from my channel, clearly something I've said in the previous videos shook you up a bit. So go ahead, please show your support and appreciation for the content by liking this video and hitting that subscribe button down below. Today's episode is on an aspect of the human experience that has been taboo for so long. It's absolutely fascinating to me how entrenched we are at fearing it as though our fear of it is ever going to stop it from occurring. Death. Now, before I jump into this episode, I do want to acknowledge that the death of loved ones is quite possibly the most, or one of the most, emotionally, excruciatingly painful aspects of the human experience, and I never want to take away from that or minimize it with this video. I also want to acknowledge that grieving looks different for everyone. And for every kind of death of a loved one, for example, self-deletion, accidental, or intentional. If you have had someone that you knew and loved transition into the great unknown, I honor your experience with that individual, and I wish you continued healing during your grieving process. Now that I've made those acknowledgments, let's talk. So, what is death? Why is it still such a fear or taboo to talk about in 2023? Ever since the dawn of our existence, death has been something that has both terrified and awed us as a humanity. Across cultures, we have created time periods or days where we celebrate it. We have seamlessly intertwined it into our lexicon, the arts, politics, entertainment, and a host of other facets of our society. Yet, it is the one thing that still rocks us to our core when it happens. According to a quick Wikipedia search for the definition of death, death is defined as the irreversible cessation of all biological functions that sustain an organism. For organisms with brain, death can also be defined as the irreversible cessation of functioning of the whole brain, including the brain stem. Brain death is sometimes used as a legal definition of death. The remains of a former organism normally begins to decompose shortly after death. Death is an inevitable process that eventually occurs in all organisms. I'd like for you to consider this thought for just a moment. We humans are the only living entity on this planet that expresses our proximity to death the way we do. No, really, think about it. No other living species memorializes their dead. No other living entity buries their dead. No other living species mourns their dead like we do. And I think I know why. They're too busy living. The late Alan Watts has a quote that I think speaks perfectly to the collective human relationship to death. He said, "Human beings are so bent on living forever that they're willing to commit suicide in the process." The reason why I think we fear death so much is because we have become disillusioned to the belief that this existence is the summation of our existence. That the creature comfort and pleasures of this experience that we call life is to be experienced for as long as we possibly can experience it, because once it's over, there's nothing else. Now, religion has done an interesting thing by filling in the void of that fear of the unknown by elevating a location or place or realm in the so-called afterlife that gives their parishioners great comfort. So I'm not saying any of that to throw any shade or to talk down on any religion, because I actually grew up in the Christian religion heavily. And I dabbled here and there in a couple of other religious beliefs before I finally opened up my third eye to my African ancestors' way of living and their spirituality. So, true story. I had two near-death experiences, one this year and one last year. The one last year is the one I'm going to share about, actually. So I was driving down the highway, going to work, and my wife was in the passenger side, and my kids were in the back, and I was in the far left lane, the fast lane, and we were moving, I want to say maybe 70, 80 miles an hour, flying, along with traffic. And so I started to feel things start to slow down a little bit. Traffic, everything just started to slow down. Even my response to what I was doing, whether I was steering or whatever it was. And so I knew what it was. It was my blood sugar. So I started making my way over into the farther right lanes. And as soon as I got to the shoulder of the highway, and I slowed down, I came to a stop, put the car in park. I looked to my left, to my right, at my wife, And I said, and those were the last words I remember. According to my wife, I slumped over, almost zero, no pulse, nothing whatsoever. She began doing CPR, commenced doing CPR. She called paramedics. They arrived eventually. I don't remember anything. The next thing I remember was waking up in the hospital with all kinds of tubes going into my arms, people talking, very disoriented. But the experience itself of, I think it was me being unconscious. I don't know. I just don't remember anything. I know it was and there's no words that I can use to describe the experience, because there was no experience, if I can use that, or if I can say that. I can't, there was no human sentient experience. There was no sound, no sight, no light, no noise, no taste, no smell. I didn't feel anything, no pain, happiness, joy. There was nothing. It was beautiful. That's the only word that I think I can come up with to describe what it was like. It was beautiful. So why did I share all this experience with you all? Well, to say this one thing, death isn't a bad or negative thing, folks. It truly isn't. Tons of people who have had NDEs, or as they call them, near-death experiences, seem to have the same sentiment about death. It's a beautiful phenomenon that shouldn't be feared at all. Here's a logical question that I'm going to pose for you all to think about as it relates to death. Why spend your life in fear or angst of something you have zero control over? Why not spend your life living it to the fullest and the best way possible? Isn't that what we came here in the first place? Peace and blessings.